Suggestions for Students of Psychology. Part 1. Substance, Power, and Law. 1. Substance. When we contemplate the external universe, we become conscious of space. We think of any object as occupying and enclosed by space. That which fills the space occupied by any object is called substance, because it stands under the surface which separates the object from the space surrounding it. Substance is that which fills space. When we think of any portion of space, however, great or small, we think of the substance which fills it, even though it be invisible and imponderable. All space is filled with substance. Density. When the particles in one mass of substance lie closer together than those in another, the first is said to be of greater density than the second. Matter. If the substance which fills a form is of greater density than that which surrounds it, vibrations transmitted through the surrounding substance are reflected from its surface. If these vibrations are of such a nature as to influence the organs of sense, they are transmitted to the brain centers, and there received by the mind as impressions, from which are derived ideas of the existence and properties of the object. Any form of sufficient density to reflect vibrations which can be transmitted to the mind through the senses is called a material object, and the substance which fills the space which it occupies is called matter. Matter is substance of sufficient density to reflect vibrations which can be transmitted to the mind through the organs of sense. Spirit. Science has proved the existence of a substance whose density is so slight that its particles are free to pass between the particles of denser substance. This substance is called ether and is said to pervade the denser substances and to fill all those vast regions of space which to human sense appear to be vacant. It is also recognized that in this substance there are many degrees of density beyond the possibility of measurement to the human mind. Forms which are filled with this ethereal or spiritual substance are imperceptible to human sense. Yet they reflect vibrations through the spiritual substance which surrounds them, which are perceptible to the spiritual senses of our being. These are called spiritual forms, and the substance which fills the space which they occupy is called spirit. Spirit is substance of insufficient density to reflect vibrations which can be transmitted to the mind through the organs of sense. It will thus be seen that matter and spirit are different degrees of density in the same universal substance, and that spirit pervades all material forms and fills all seemingly vacant space. It is clear also that in nature there is no line of demarcation between matter and spirit, but that the distinction between them is made by the human mind. If our senses were more refined, we should be able to perceive how substantial spiritual forms are, and how real is the spiritual universe which pervades and surrounds our material world. 2. Power. When we contemplate the external universe, we observe that changes are constantly taking place in it. When we think of ourselves and so become conscious of our mental states, we realize constant changes in them also. Whenever we become conscious of a change, either in our environment or in our mental states, we immediately think of the power which produced the change. We never think of power but as the cause of change, and our knowledge of power is derived wholly from study of the changes which it produces. Power is that which produces change. We know that the condition of every mass of substance is constantly changing, and that every particle of substance is continually changing its relation to other particles. Therefore, we infer that power and substance are coexistent, and that as substance is universal, power is infinite. Power and substance are infinite and inseparable. We observe the greatest changes in substances of least density and conclude that power is most active in these substances. We may say then that the unlimited changes in nature are caused by an infinite power which acts in all substances, but most freely in the most spiritual. Attraction. When we contemplate the changes taking place in the external universe, we notice a tendency for all material substance to be drawn together. That activity of power which causes material substances to be drawn together is called attraction. When it is exerted between the particles in any mass of substance, it is called cohesion. When it is exerted between a mass of substance and particles brought into contact with its surface, it is called adhesion. When it is exerted between the heavenly bodies or between the earth and material substances near its surface, it is called gravitation. When it is exerted between substances which are fitted to blend with each other, it is called affinity. When we think of ourselves, we realize that while the physical substance of our being is attracted to the earth, the spiritual substance of our being is drawn toward other souls, especially toward those whose habits of action are such as to blend with our own. The power of attraction acting thus in the soul is called love. We are also conscious of being drawn forth out of ourselves by the attraction of the soul for the universal spirit. The attraction of the soul for the universal spirit is called religion. Differentiation. Through the power of attraction, the substance which fills the universe is divided into separate masses, and what is called matter is differentiated from the spiritual substance which pervades and surrounds it. The power in any mass of substance is organized as a unit and acts as such in molding its expression, organizing further power, and producing changes in its environment. Thus, the infinite power is differentiated into multitudes of finite subordinate powers through which, as agents, it acts in producing all the changes which we behold in the environment and realize in our mental states. But the indivisibility of the infinite power is maintained as the substance in which it dwells and from which its activity proceeds is the universal spirit. The power which is resident and active in spiritual substances is called intelligence. The power which is resident and active in material substances is called force. Intelligence produces changes in the condition of matter through the cooperation of the forces resident in matter. Being. A power which is the conscious cause of its own activities is called a being. The infinite power is called the supreme being because it is the first cause of all activities in the universe. Vibration. When two bodies are attracted toward each other but are prevented from coming together by the resistance of intervening substances or by counter-attractions, the tendency of each to move toward the other displaces the adjacent particles of the intervening substance. These encounter the resistance of the substance beyond and are forced back to their former position while their motion is communicated to the next adjacent particles. This progressive motion is continued until it reaches the other body. It is called vibration. By means of vibration, communication is established between powers resident in bodies which are attracted toward each other but prevented from coming together. Rates of vibration. it will be seen that if a vibration is communicated through a material substance, it meets with far greater resistance than in passing through a spiritual substance. Hence, it travels much more slowly than if communicated through a spiritual substance. As all substances are constantly being acted upon by the power of attraction, vibrations are constantly being inaugurated at all points and traveling through all space. Hence, all substances are in a state of vibration. The denser the substance, the slower will be its rate of vibration. The more spiritual the substance, the higher will be its rate of vibration. Vibrations which are inaugurated by intelligence travel through the universal spiritual substance and encounter very slight resistance. Those inaugurated by force travel through material substances and are greatly modified by the conditions of the substance through which they are communicated. 3. Laws. The conditions which limit the activity of finite powers are called laws. A law is a condition which limits action. The activity of any finite power is limited by the laws of its own nature and by the conditions of its environment. The nature of the power involved in a seed is to carry out the impulse communicated to it by the parent plant and organize the elements it finds in its environment into a similar plant. But the power of the seed can produce such an effect only when it finds within range of its activity other powers whose nature is such as to cause them to respond to the attraction it exerts and cooperate with it in the evolution of its destiny. As the plant grows, its power increases and it comes into relation with new powers and conditions, which in turn limit its larger activity. It will thus be seen that the laws which govern any power are the conditions produced by other powers combined with those produced by its own activity. These are, in the case of a plant, 1. The impulse communicated by the parent plant to the power embodied in the seed and the conditions imposed in the construction of the seed. 2. The conditions imposed by the activity of other powers in the environment. 3. The conditions produced by its own activity and growth. All powers become laws when considered as limiting by their activity the freedom of other powers. Every power is a law unto itself, inasmuch as it is limited in its activity by the conditions which it has created. Material laws. The condition which govern the activity of force in matter are called material laws. When the power of cohesion is considered as limiting the activity of power in the individual particle, it is called the law of cohesion. When the power of gravitation is considered as limiting the activity of power in bodies near the surface of the earth, it is called the law of gravitation. Any force, when considered as limiting the activity of other forces, is called a material law. Spiritual law. The only condition to which pure intelligence is subject is the law of attraction, which leads it to seek communication with other intelligence of the same order. Hence, it is said that love is the law of life. Moral laws. In a community, the activity of each individual is limited by the activity of others and by the customs of all. The conditions which govern the individual in his relation with others and those imposed upon him by the customs of the community are called moral laws. Artificial laws. Artificial laws are instituted by men for the purpose of securing freedom to all by limiting the freedom of those who would interfere with the freedom of others. Only those laws are just which operate in this manner. End of Part 1, Substance, Power, and Law.